Welcome everyone to my live stream. It's great to have you here. My name is Lee Harding, and I am doing this little experiment on Sunday today with three things. I want to go over some of the things that I've written lately and some news, and if we have anyone commenting, then I can also respond to any questions that you have, current events, things that are going on that you think I might have some insight on. I hope that the Facebook comments will show up on StreamYard. What this thing is telling me is that you can see the comments, you as a viewer, if I am using this on a personal Facebook page. But if it's there's some things with the settings here I'm not quite sure. So if you get onto my YouTube channel, which you can tell because it's Lee Harding and it has the Lee TV logo in it in the channel description, then if you put a comment there, I guarantee you that in the super chat today, I can respond to you. So I write for a couple of organizations primarily. One is the Frontier Center and the other is the Epoch Times. And lately I have written a few things that might interest you. The first one is about the fact checkers. And we are seeing this all the time on social media, where if you post something about the election, you post something in the States, you post something about COVID, you are going to see some kind of thing. Is this source good? Blah, blah, blah. You may even see fact checking going on in the newspapers. And I talk about how Snopes is not necessarily reliable, PolyFact not necessarily reliable, and how at best these fact checkers are another reference point, but they may be just as guilty of spin as the original article that you were trying to check. So just because someone claims that they are an authority and they have refuted this, rebutted this, whatever it is, does not mean you should believe them. Second thing I want to draw your attention to is Google was put into an antitrust lawsuit. And this is very, very important because Google has a tremendous amount of control over elections all over the world. And we're not even talking about underhanded things such as we're hearing about, or some of you are hearing about, stateside. I'm talking about things like if you put something on the top of a search engine consciously by your algorithm to favor one candidate or another, the amount of influence that putting the favorable results in a search engine for is just tremendous. And they did an experiment. Robert Epstein did this. No relation to Jeffrey Epstein that I know of. But Robert Epstein, who used to be the head of Psychology Today, or the chief editor for that publication, he did a few experiments and he could not believe that just simply by putting an entry on the top of a search engine, what it could do for what a person thought about a candidate. I mean, they had 3 control groups, and if you put one candidate on top with favorable articles at the top of the search engine, they would think that person was great. And it didn't matter. You could manipulate just about anybody to a very sizable percentage. So this is a remarkable amount of power. Now, when you add to that burying articles way, way down, certain forms of censorship, that becomes a substantial amount of power. One of the things that we heard about on Facebook, testimony from Mark Zuckerberg, is, and not so much from him, but from someone who leaked to a US government representative who was questioning him, is that they actually coordinate. Facebook, Google, and Twitter coordinate on censorship ideas and suppression ideas as to what kinds of articles they should suppress. So they are consciously manipulating the minds of not just the American public, but us in Canada as well, people all over the world. And Google has such a tremendous monopoly. It's a vast majority of searches in the entire world. And what this lawsuit says is that they have achieved this monopoly status through some very sweetheart deals that have really cornered the market and have not allowed other entries to be in there. So this is the first time that the American government has even tried to take on big tech, really since Microsoft in, what, 1998 or 95. I mean, they were fining them $1 million a day because they had Internet Explorer along with the operating system. So I pretty much ended Netscape. Do you remember Netscape? Not unless you're at least 30. How Marxists take over and what to do about it. Now, Yuri Bezmenov, he defected from KGB and from Russia in 1970. He settled in Canada, and he did a number of interviews and lectures in the 1980s, the video for which you can see in some places, still on YouTube, and also wrote a few books. And he's very clear about how the communists do their suppression tactics and how they do their intimidation of media and basically their Marxist media management. And also how they try to subvert institutions and undermine them from within. And then when the process is complete, they bring about an actual revolution. One of the things that people who are talking to me that notice, like, we notice some of the same things, and they're starting to ask my opinion on some things, is they ask me, how do you open people's eyes? Because they're just believing what the media tells them, and you try to show them, and they don't see it. Now, apart from prayer, I'm just going to tell you, it's going to be very uphill. And one of the things that Bezmenov says, and I've written on him a couple times, and there's going to be more articles trickling out in the coming weeks, but he says that when you have had a child who has been educated from kindergarten or preschool on right to adulthood through university in Marxist thinking, he says there is no amount of facts or information that can ever change their mind. He says it is a pattern way of thinking. He says the only thing you can do is to have patriotic education with Western values for another generation and start them up and wait 20 years till they are in the institutions of power, and then you can have something different. And he says the only thing that can take that former group out of their brainwashing is after the Marxists take over, 10 or 15 years later, they figure out that it didn't really deliver what it promised to. Well, by then it's kind of too late because it's taken over and it's in all your institutions. So that's something he says you might want to look at that. I did an article as well about how there was the Ebola outbreak in the Congo, and out there in the relief efforts, unfortunately, people were sexually taking advantage of women, and doctors were like, basically everybody who, there was one woman who said, I don't know any woman that didn't have to do something for someone, either to get a job or to keep a job. The World Health Organization is one of the organizations named there, but there does seem to be at least one or two stray volunteers from some mainstream charitable organizations that this is involved with as well. So if you give to any of those that do relief in Africa, you might want to look at this. Really don't want to name them here. Star Trek becomes real. Now, this one will be fascinating to you if you believe that there has been more going on in space than what we have been told about, that there is technology that is hidden in secret access, special access projects in the military that we may not know about. And that one of the things that Ben Rich said, who used to be the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, is that they keep a lot of things secret and they'll only bring it out if someone else is getting close to that technology, then they'll lay claim to it and make it public. Well, in very recent years, it seems like the Chinese are getting close enough on the trail of things that the secret aspects of the military have had for years, at least in the United States, probably not only the United States, but certainly the US. Now they are releasing the patents for it. This is everything from energy patents to, almost Star Trek kind of propulsion systems. And you will have to look at this. Now, in my article, I will show you, there's embedded links. You can see the actual patent applications that are there and in whose name they are in. And there's a publication that is taking this seriously, that is sort of a motorcycle, cars and this kind of thing publication. It's not a, it's not a far-fetched kind of thing. And they're looking at these patents and they're asking serious questions about it. And they're starting to get somewhere. And there has been some indication. There was one person who had been basically dismissed from, I believe it was the Air Force, because he was saying so much and more than they wanted him to. And even then, they thought that he might actually take over Donald Trump's Space Force. And he said that there is technology right now that is not developmental. That's the way he termed it. that can get you from anywhere on Earth to anywhere else on Earth in a very short amount of time. I think it was an hour or two. So when he says it's not developmental, that means they have it and it works and they can use it, and probably are using it, right? So these people are credible. They have all the potential, the credentials to be saying these things. And so if that interests you, take a read. BC Workers' Comp, what it seems is there used to be some incentive packages for people to refuse, at least at the management level, for them to refuse legitimate claims so they could keep them under a certain amount and whatnot. And there was a report, that practice seems to have ended, but there was a report that was given in BC by, I believe, Janet Patterson, who said that there's still some things that need to change. And I'm sure that there are some of these issues in workers' compensation across the country. One of the worst parts of what they're doing in BC right now is they are actually taking workers' comp and using it to pay corona claims. So if someone gets COVID-19, they've built such a surplus. They've built, the business owners and basically a certain spectrum of workers, apparently, ostensibly, have been denied claims. There are many who come forward and said, I have a clear claim, and they've gone through court systems and everything, and the court can't even overrule them. They just get put in a loop, and it's a problem. But anyway, they've got a surplus that's so big that what they're doing now is if someone is employed and they get corona in BC, they will pay out the claims out of workers' comp. They'll assume that they got it at work. Now, if you're an employer, I mean, what a great way to kill a small business, because if you're an employer out there, all of a sudden you get a few of those claims. Well, now, you're not a very safe workplace to be at. It has nothing to do with workplace safety and whether they're wearing helmets and whether they're, doing this and that. This is very unfair. Okay, so another Rezmanov article I wrote here, Marxist Media Management. He said, basically, we take all the Western suckers, these useful idiots, we would get them drunk, we would take them around to all the places we wanted them to see, and if they asked a stupid question, we'd give them a stupid answer. Are there political prisoner camps in Russia? No, there are no political prisoner camps in Russia. And he just thought the Western media was really spineless. Later on, he worked for CBC. I don't have this in any of these two articles, but he worked for CBC, and finally, the Russians figured out who he was because he'd taken the name Thomas Schumann. They figured out who it was, and they tried to threaten him and tell him that, it's very dangerous for you to be driving in Montreal. It might not be very safe for you. And of course, suggesting that he might have a car accident. And he told them that, I've got some Kalashnikovs in my basement as well. So if you want to come at me, come ahead. And he wasn't going to be intimidated. He claims that this person, that the Russian ambassador actually went to Pierre Trudeau and went to the brass of the CBC, and they said, hey, look, you're saying some things that the Russian communists probably wouldn't like, and so we're going to dismiss you. So that's how communist Russia was calling the shots at the CBC in the 1970s. Yikes. Okay. Talk about destroying a statue, destroying a culture. There is a cultural genocide that is going on against Canada, against the United States, against Western institutions. And this movement really started about the same time that the Orange Revolution was doing this, taking down the Marxist communist statues in Ukraine, and also when ISIS was taking down just about anything in the areas of Iraq that it had possessed. So this is a strategy. You destroy a person's history, you destroy their identity, and then they don't have any roots. And then you impose the new culture or whatever it is that you want them to think and believe and have them forget completely about the old. So Mao did the same thing in China. And at the bottom here, I'm talking about how the Muslim Brotherhood needs examination. And this thing in France, I mean, it happened before the recent beheading that Macron seemed to be quite upset about. And see, I think we need to have an examination like that in Canada, because I actually see some parallels between what the Russians did, what the Chinese are doing, and what the Muslim Brotherhood is doing in terms of front organizations that are really loyal to a different kind of cause. Now, I wanted to show you some Epoch Times writing. Here we go, let's go at. Who is that bald guy there at the top? sexy. All right. Businesses suffer from COVID restrictions. This is, if you're in Manitoba, and I mean, it's so stupid. If you go to, in Manitoba, if you're a business right now and someone says to go in the store, look, I know I can't buy anything in here, but could you bring outside? I'll buy this thing. No, you can't do that. But if you phone ahead and say, put it out in the curb, then you can do that. Oh, okay. Right. Toronto, if you go to Taste Toronto, there is an entire article now where they have by neighborhood the number of bars and restaurants that are no longer opening. There are some that have been in business for 30 years. Now, as some of you may know, Justin Trudeau had an unfortunate news that he wasn't quite up on having the first, had made a deal with China to have some vaccines, and because of our political tensions with them, because they're keeping Canadians over there, keeping the Huawei executive over here. So anyway, China couldn't get it. That's a good thing. And, oh boy. Anyway, we're not going to be at the front of the line. And that may not be the worst thing, truly, for Canadians who are concerned about the vaccine, because there are a number of vaccines. And I see we've got some comments here. So why don't I just take a quick look at, and if there's questions, I will answer them at the end. And what do we got here? Alberta Free. I'm going to make this full screen so I can read it. Just give me a second. Okay, big American worldwide mainstream prostitutes are our modern-day Marxist Lugenpress. All right, we got some background there. Yes, prostitutes is a term I hear from that one guy, Gerard Salente, I think is his name. That's one he likes to use. And yes, they do seem to have a universal perspective. I will not be taking any advice from the disgusting communists who you mean Tedros there that was with alliance some terrorist groups in Ethiopia? You won't listen to him, and that China has a whole bunch of investment in Ethiopia, $500 million sports stadiums. You think that China's compromised them? All right, too bad. The Alberta government has written the Who Our Health Act by stating that they use their, well, it was encouraging to see that Premier Kenney was standing against the Great Reset, and he insulted the people at Davos and said it's their little left-wing club. Mind you, Michelle Rempel was at Davos, and it seems to me that Jason Kenney was at Bilderberg twice. I do like Jason Kenney, and I don't know, if you get invited to one of these meetings, I mean, Premier Wall was at Bilderberg. If you get invited to one of these meetings, it's a very good connections. The thing is, you have to make sure that, I don't know, it's tough to not be, if you're in a place of wealth and power and influence, and you get introduced to that, it's harder to be stronger than that thing in which you have been invited to. And who knows, I mean, there's official meetings and there's unofficial meetings, okay? Who knows what else is going on. He will remove the forced vaccination from our Health Act in the spring. I don't know why they can't take it out now, or why they didn't take it out when they amended the act on July 29th. Well, part of it is because when we had the application by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, that was a big motivation to do that. And so it's, you know, sometimes governments want to do the right thing and politicians, but you can't really expect them to lead. If there isn't someone in the public that is really pushing for something on the other side, and it's only a loud voice on one side, it's very hard for that one voice to, or for a politician to just go totally against the grain without any public backing. Right. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. And I am glad you're holding down this live stream, telling me that what I'm saying is interesting. That's what I want. Freedom. And hello, Kat. Glad you're watching. Okay, history is racist. We could deconstruct that one time. The implications are what it really means. My voice is scratchy. Your mic is cutting out. Goodbye. Crumb. Sorry to hear that. Okay. Manitoba conservatives are sicking. Dr. Brent is one of the biggest pieces of globalist garbage. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Dr. Brent. I know that the premier in Manitoba had said that he didn't want to be the Grinch, I guess you might say, that stole Christmas from Manitobans, as the rebel media called him. But he said, I hope one day you will respect me for what I'm doing. Yeah, well, I'm glad you're with me, David. Shout out to Limerick. It's buffering. That's my sick computer for you. Okay, audio's breaking up, Captain. And yeah, you're catching up to what I said. Yes, Charles Salente. All right. Oh, we got some new things. You know what? If anyone wants to send me $500 to leehardingsk@gmail.com, the buffering will stop. I think it's a computer issue, not a bandwidth issue. Nice to see you, Norm. Thanks for saying hi. Has Canada used Dominion voting machines in Canada? Yes, they have. Yes, they have, but only in municipal elections. And I did some videos about this on Lee TV in the past, and you can look up those for some. The first one that I did on this is probably the most insightful as to what was done in Canada. But we've had many, many jurisdictions, especially in Ontario, and I know that Kevin Johnson was on Laura Lynn Thompson's channel, which you can still find all the videos in full on YouTube. But he said maybe a week ago that when he was running to be mayor of Mississauga, that is what happened to him. He thinks that the votes were modulated because he said every time there was a new counting, a new publishing, a new update for the night, he always had 13.7% of the vote or something like that every single time, which you know is not, that you don't have that kind of consistency. That is not possible to within like 1/1000th. That is just not. Okay, so people are telling me, and this is helpful feedback for me about what you are hearing. It has a static sound. Okay, it's breaking up. Thanks for staying with me, Karen. Maybe I'll talk a little slower. I have an intelligent audience, but it might come through a bit clearer. Here's one of the really stupid things that I saw in this polling by Ipsos. Okay, so Ipsos reported that 77% of Canadians would wait for reports about the effectiveness of any side effects before taking a vaccine. Roughly 7 in 10 Canadians are nervous about taking a vaccine created and approved so quickly, with similar numbers concerned about potential negative long-term effects. Paradoxically, 57% believe the vaccine will be completely safe, and 52% said they would take the vaccine as soon as it is available. And then 59% of Canadians support mandatory vaccination, a drop of 13 points since July. Okay, first of all, Ipsos is doing this polling on behalf of the World Economic Forum, the ones that want the Great Reset. They're doing this all over the world. They have surveyed 18,000 people all over the world. So will this compromise their results? Who knows? But either that has happened or Canadians are not even thinking. How do you have 77% of Canadians say that they would wait for reports about the effectiveness or any side effects before taking the vaccine, but then you have 52% believing or saying they would take it as soon as it's available? Well, you can't have both. Like, either some people are just not thinking, or there is something really wrong with these numbers because they don't make sense. And then 57% believe it would be completely safe. So without even knowing what it is, they just feel confident that these medical authorities, oh yes, I'm sure it will be safe. Do they realize that in 1986 in the United States, there was the Vaccine Injury Compensation Act, I think it was called, that the big pharma had went to the American government, and they were losing so much on these lawsuits from side effects from vaccines that they refused. They said, look, if we don't get protection from these lawsuits, we're going to stop making them. That's how inherently risky vaccines were. So the American government said, we will take all the liability, we will make you immune from lawsuits, and we will create a special fund paid for by taxpayers that will compensate anyone for vaccine injuries. So, well, I mean, the fox got in the henhouse after that, and there were people on the list of approvals for vaccines and putting things on the formulary for vaccines that had a direct financial interest in those vaccines being approved. And so we had the number of vaccines going from what, like 5, as it would have been 50 years ago. You would have had your basic vaccinations to dozens now. And in some places, they're putting in laws that you cannot refuse them. So you believe 52% that this will be completely safe? Coronavirus vaccines are another issue altogether, because a lot of them are based on mRNA, like Moderna, which has inherent risks in it because you affect the RNA and it can affect your DNA. This is about fighting a virus, right? Not about changing people's DNA. So there's a reason we didn't have a coronavirus vaccine for SARS-CoV-1. And I'm going to keep moving here. Thanks for staying with me. Okay. So decriminalization, not the way to deal with opioid crisis, experts say. You will be interested if that's the way you see it as well, because I have some credible voices that have this, although so much of the social justice crowd has captured this way of thinking that it's harder and harder to find experts that will oppose it. The problem with this is that not only do they want to do this in Vancouver, but they also want to make this happen across Canada. So part of what the mayor of Vancouver wants to do is to write the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and also the BC municipalities to encourage all of them to do this, right? I talked to in this article a former drug and alcohol counselor, and he said when they first brought in safe injection sites in Toronto, the 20 residents at the long-term facility where they were drying out, he said they were all against it. He said, what are they doing? Like, that's not going to help. All right, internet content control plans concern free speech advocates. I had an interview there with John Robson. He was so funny and he was so accurate. Maybe I should just post that whole interview on this channel. But they were concerned because the Liberals have said a lot of things that they're going to do. But when we're looking at this legislation, some of it is there, but it's there in a really vague kind of way. And it seems like some of this might wait to, it's like they're putting in the framework of this actual banning of politically incorrect speech or hateful speech or whatever won't be in the actual explicit writing, but it could be at a level of regulation that Cabinet decides to later, which would of course be an easier way to do it, to get the law passed and then to do these things later as they feel that they can politically get away with it. One of the things they did was they changed, and this is later on in another article, but they changed the CRTC to, when it's talking about Canadian content, that the Canadian content should include lots of people of lots of different racial backgrounds, especially Aboriginals, that it should include people of various sexual orientations and things, and that it should reflect their desires and their hopes and aspirations, and of course their right to equality. So there seems to be a very politically correct layer that's getting put over this of the left-wing rallying cry of diversity. So even Canadian content now may not be, well, I guess what Harper would have called old stock Canadians. The privacy bill that has come up, that they are putting together, I talked to some people that said, and they're not necessarily conservatives, but they've just said this bill is so poorly worded. It promises to bring all these tough penalties, but then it undermines the rights of privacy on the other end, and it makes breaking this law very hard to prove. And even then, it will be at the discretion of the privacy commissioner. If he doesn't feel like going after your particular thing, well, too bad. This is not good legislation. And they said we have legislation in 3 provinces on privacy laws: BC, Alberta, and Quebec. It's very clear. You know exactly what it means. And they said this is all what this guy called loosey-goosey language. Okay, and this was from a former head of the CRTC. Gang violence. Okay, gang violence. Why are people going to gangs? And I talked to some people that say that fatherlessness and family breakdown is a lot of what contributes to gangs. And also that when you take the Black Lives Matter advice and you withdraw proactive policing, well, something fills the void. And sometimes gangs become the order that is imposed on a place that the police have neglected. The other thing that attracts people to gangs is when there's fatherlessness, they are still looking for some of that male bonding, and as they grow up and hit adulthood and their teenage years, even some that contributes to some of their attraction to gangs. Okay, I talked to one physician. I think I actually missed this quote, but one of the doctors said, "Look, the average death of a coronavirus victim is older than the average age of death, period." Okay, but he says, look, he said, do the masks, do the whatever, but he says, don't shut down people's lives and lock them down, because selling and living and associating and you know, this is part of normal life. And he says, at this point, you have to demonstrate the need to do these things. You can't assume by default it's the best thing to do, as if lowering coronavirus was the only consideration here, because it's not. There's deaths on the other side from suicide, from drug use, from murder. Finding out in Vancouver, the murders are up 56%. Well, yeah, when you start taking away people's right to have any livelihood or even have a life because there's nowhere left to go, and you can't see your family in some places. I mean, in Manitoba, boy, if you're not like an essential visitor, you can't even visit someone's home. I mean, this is like imposing house arrest on an entire province. And then you get all these people phoning in, and then the RCMP, they'll be there. They'll be there to issue all these fines. You gathered at someone's house. Oh boy, okay, here's another bill to regulate the internet. They're going to try and go after Netflix and all these people. You'll only end up paying more for that. That's all it will do. Pandemic fears overshadow Ontario fiscal imbalance. Yeah. The greatest subnational jurisdiction in the world for debt is Ontario, and it's only getting bigger. BC casinos, oh boy, they had so much bad money there, and people turned a blind eye for a long time to a lot of things. And I packed a lot in that article. They let me make it longer than most of the articles I write for Epoch Times ever are. I don't know how far to keep going down. I'll just say it was a great pleasure to talk to Alan Cameron. He's 95. He's apparently the last living veteran in Moose Jaw, and that is, he's pretty cool, and his mind is still, and I met them. Okay, let's visit some other things. I'm seeing what you're saying here about the audio. Okay, David is asked, why is it that Trudeau never seems to get charged for like treason? Is a prime minister protected from this? You know, treason is the only thing that you can still have the death penalty for. They kept the death penalty in Canada for things like that. So yes, you can be charged for treason. And ostensibly, we are all, one of the things about democracies is that no one is above the law, including the prime minister. But in a practical sense, that starts to break down. We had the court case Norm Traversy put against Trudeau, and the hearing, the date of the hearing, they closed the doors, didn't let him in, and then said, don't apply to anything again, or it'll be vexatious. So you have to wait 6 months, right? He's walking out of the courtroom. Someone told him, you know, they're going to kill you. Okay, this is his account. The other thing is, I mean, Trudeau appointed the head of the RCMP. So what is she going to be the one to turn on him? Integrity says yes. Do you want to be that person? So yeah, I don't know if what Trudeau is doing amounts to treason. You would have to see. I mean, there's things. Okay, you go to Yaga Khan to his island at the same time John Kerry is there. It does make you wonder whose agenda he's really serving. I think one common denominator of a lot of Liberal policy is that it is eroding Canada in one way or another. But treason is a lot higher threshold to prove, and that's what I'll say on that. And Dr. Brent is helping them sell Manitoban. Yes, we are in an era where it seems like the doctors that we never elected are ruling. Yeah, rushed vaccine. There's a reason we don't rush vaccines. And yeah, we may not know it's unsafe until it's too late. That's entirely possible. There was, he's an East Indian man who's well versed in this, co-wrote a book about it, and he was on Laura Ingraham's show on Fox and said basically this coronavirus could be to your doom. The vaccine for it. And the interview did not get to enough depth as to why you could make a general statement and back it up as to why that was the case. That is an interesting assertion. Okay, interesting. So Lloydminster on the Alberta side, just cross that border to freedom. Just go through those two barber poles and arrive there. The lowest case numbers for 100,000 people. That's interesting. Do you think masks are causing an increase in cases because of the unsanitary compliant people touching the masks all the time? Every city in Alberta had an increase after the bylaws, not before. Yeah, there have been some very interesting time-lapse chronology things as to when restrictions were introduced, and then, did the case numbers go up after that? The case numbers have to do with a lot of things, including testing. And one of the things, if you are able to find a graph that will show you the deaths have not yet reached what they were in the spring from this, right? Even though the case numbers are way, way up, and we could talk about the reasons for the case numbers too, because even these tests are not reliable. They are subject to false positives depending on how you use them, and actually they are not even based on the virus itself, because the CDC documents, and they are still saying this, but initial documents in January said there are no known isolates of the virus. So what they did was they made the coronavirus test, the PCR test, based on some segments of the proteins that were close to what that was. So they basically took their best guess and then took patented lines of germs or viruses or virus material segments anyway, and then made the test based on that. So the PCR test in different countries has different numbers of segments that it's tested for, depending on how loosey-goosey it is. There are a number of conditions, if you've had them in the past, that if there's residues of those things, it will still turn out as a positive. So Barbara Yaffe on July 30th, who's the assistant chief medical officer in Ontario, said that up to 50, if you were to do the general public, up to 50% would be false positives. There was a New York Times report that said depending on how you do the test, you could have a past 90% false positives. And that is to think that we're just banning people from working and everyone who ever met them from associating with working. And here in Saskatchewan, you can't have more than 5 people in a restaurant now, and you have to sign out you were there and when you were there and everything. This is madness. Okay, it's easier to get away with crimes with the mask on. Yeah, whenever I see a room full of people that are wearing these and they're telling us what to do, I see gangsters. Okay, house arrest on the entire world. It's a computer virus. Yes, well, Bill Gates couldn't keep us from those. I don't know how he can keep us from these. If you were to, it's interesting, and we're talking on Sunday today. In Matthew 24, Jesus talked about the end times. And if you look at the Gospel of Thomas, which is apocryphal, and there's reasons it wasn't in the Bible, not even apocryphal, it's Gnostic. But if you look at the parallel passage in the Gospel of Thomas to Matthew 24. There's a lot more things in there, and they are all true. Part of it said that there in the last days there would be a small group of people that would amass lands, a great number of lands and wealth for themselves, and that people would be, it was like they said they would be in prison but not in jail, something like that. And we're all in debt slavery, most of us. Right? And Kat says residents in care homes are dying from depression due to this. I regularly see happy people go downhill once these measures came into place. That is so sad. You know, and these people say we're protecting the old. We're killing the old. I mean, we're killing their spirit. Sometimes their body follows. We're killing the spirits of the youth. I mean, they are being denied their chances in athletics. Last June they were denied a real graduation. You know, this is back, and we certainly can't get back all of our debts that we are taking as provinces, as countries, to do that. The Calgary YWCA, if they condemn those orders, since it might make women's domestic difficulties worse, I'm curious to see what their response was, because that is a good question. And hospitals are involved. Well, you know, it's very ironic, in my opinion, because at least the nurses union said, well, first of all, there were some cases a while ago where if a nurse didn't take the flu shot, they had to wear a mask all the time, and the masks were making some of them sick. And finally, they said this is a human rights violation. And this decision or realization, I don't know all the machinations of how that came about, but anyway, it was decided that it could not be made binding for them. But now I see the Saskatchewan Union of Nurses being the ones that are encouraging this for the general public. Well, that's not consistent. Okay. Want to get into some news and point you in some directions if this interests you. Sean Stone, who is the son of Oliver Stone, has done his PhD dissertation, and actually about the New World Order, not as some nebulous philosophy or some conspiracy theory. He's talked about in his dissertation, he says this is the term they used. And there were people who wanted to keep British imperialism working all over the world. And there were others who had a view that this needs to be more expansive than British imperialism. And this New World Order term was something that was used by H.G. Wells and others. And so he talks about this and they discuss it a bit. And if that interests you, then I encourage it. And you might remember that Sean Stone was also on Jesse Ventura's show in its final season on that. Here's another one that might interest you, and I want to mention it. It's all on X22 Report, which was a very popular channel that was purged along with many more on October 15th in the lead up to the US election. And he's interviewed Dave Hayes, who's also known as the Praying Medic. And one of the things Dave Hayes says there is that we cannot, what the Lord has shown him, he says, is that we cannot count on having our normal means of communication continue. And he mentioned, and I don't know if this was part of what he was shown, but he mentioned things like Zoom, Skype, Gmail, okay? So I was paying attention to that. He says in the coming months, we will not necessarily be able to count on those mediums to be communicating with each other. So maybe it's time to get a Proton email account. Now, so, you know, I hear these things and I file them away and then I pay attention to see if anything matches it. Something that's very interesting is I've had 3 people tell me in the last week or a bit that their emails are disappearing. And one of them had a SaskTel account, but they tried to forward something that I had written, and they said it just vanished. There's no record of its forwarding. There's no record of whatever. Now I said, did you use Outlook? Because sometimes if your send and your input settings and your refresh settings are not right, goofy things can happen. No, it wasn't that. She wasn't using that. So okay, I'm listening. She tried again, you know. And so then something else I wrote that has really very little to do with Corona or anything. I started to write about an idea for a book, and it's about what the scriptures say that can encourage us as we head into the last days. And I'd sent an installment, and this friend found it very inspiring. And she says, I'm not crazy. I don't know why my computer deletes what you send when I respond to your email, leaving my copy without the guts. Can you send the next installment to me again, please? So then I told this to another friend who's been thinking of taking legal action against one of the governments on what they've been doing with the Corona restrictions. He said, you know what? We had emails to the lawyer disappear. Okay, so if any of this, if you hear of this happening, let me know. Okay, so I'm very curious to know who this is happening to and why. Well, I think we know why, but I'd like to hear. Now, does the Canadian government have authority to do something about this? Well, I can tell you that the big tech is fighting for everything. They're fighting for their lives right now because they know if Trump wins again, he's not afraid to face them and to take them down with whatever tools he has necessary. And everything that the collective powers that be have been trying to put together, of which the Great Reset is one expression, is at stake. And so things like integrity or the rule of law or anything that the illusions are off. I mean, the mainstream media is just interested in telling you what they think you should know. And they're also very self-convinced of their own perspective as well. So it's hard to say how much is intentional deceit, how much is if you want to call it legitimate deceit because they actually believe this stuff. I mean, even the Bible talks about deceiving others and being deceived. I don't know, but I think it got far too little attention. You know, when Harper brought in C-51, and there's always a law after there's one of these attacks, it doesn't matter what it is, there's always a law. And so when that soldier was killed and, you know, he shot up Parliament and whatever, okay, we have a law, right? And it was the fourth attempt to bring in some kind of regulation or surveillance on the internet. And the Liberals looked like they were opposing it, but then they brought in something that was even worse, which was C-59. And this has gotten far too little attention. And a lot of things to be, first of all, it allowed Canada to do what they said that other, Russia was doing against the United States and whatnot, cyber warfare, cyber things. It allowed us to be the aggressor, to do those kinds of things for the first time. So now Canada can be a bad actor. And it also allowed some more things to be done domestically. So I have embedded links in my article on this. And in December of 2017, the Citizens Lab at the University of Toronto issued an analysis of C-59. And they said, this is a quote, "From mass dissemination of false information to impersonation, leaking foreign documents in order to influence political and legal outcomes, disabling account or network access, large-scale denial of service attacks, and interference with the electricity grid, the possibilities for the types of activities contemplated in Bill C-59 are limited only by the imagination." So if you want to learn more about what Trudeau government authorized itself to do with very little oversight, just talk to the Minister of Defense. They can approve it. You can read that. I just watched the Matrix movie for the first time in many years. And there was a line there that I think is very relevant. There's lots of things there, but this really helped me again. And Morpheus says, the Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. Who is benefiting from coronavirus. Qui bono, who benefits? The old Latin question. 40 million Americans filed for unemployment during the pandemic, but the billionaires saw their net worth increase by $500 billion. Who benefits when Manitoba gets shut down in the season and they can buy summer clothing? No, they can't. They can buy winter clothing. They can't buy jewelry. They can't buy electronics, but they can buy, diapers. Okay. At least they get something, right? The billionaires are winning. The billionaires have gained, while the middle class have been decimated. And that is what is necessary to bring the world to a new feudalism. So Jeff Bezos, who not only owns Amazon, he owns the New York Times and Washington Post. His wealth rose by 48 billion. The founder of Zoom, he made an extra 2.5 billion. That's his net worth has grown by that. Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer, his net worth increased by 15.7 billion. That's kind of amazing to me because, well, I mean, it's harder to buy computers, but they're not really selling computers. They're selling software. Oh boy, the casino magnate saw his wealth Sheldon Adelson saw his wealth increase by 5 billion. I don't know how. Half the casinos were shut down. Elon Musk saw an increase of 17.2 billion. Yeah, okay. And the stock market plummeted by 37% in March. How have the rich gotten richer? I guess you'll have to read Business Insider to find out. The last thing that I want to show you, and then I'm going to go to questions, the last of the questions, and then sign off, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Now, Corsi is brilliant. He wrote some great books about Obama. He actually said that Trump was approached in the fall of 2015 by military intelligence and shown the massive amounts of treason that were going on and all of the deep state swamp stuff. And it took some convincing to get Trump to run. And he decided to run knowing what he was up against. What Corsi says now is Trump has some clear paths to victory. And he said one of the main, and they involve the courts, he said one of the main things is the way that these state legislatures in almost all the states that did them and all of the states that are, the 5 or 6 states in question that Trump was winning, and then all of a sudden they stopped counting the votes, which has never been done before in American electoral history. And then they all started up again in the middle of the night. And then a disproportionate number of votes were for Biden, and on and on. He says the process by which they authorized the mass sending of mail-in ballots, they had the authority to do it, but they did not exercise that authority correctly. It should have been done through the state legislature, and that was not, the state legislature was not used. So these votes are not legal and they are unconstitutional. And he says that there is a very clear precedent. And he's actually put his own Supreme Court filing on this question to there. There's another 2 means by which he says that Trump also has a path to victory that is on very solid legal footing. So if you want to know more, you can watch what he said. All right, so let's get my face on the final parts of your questions and see what we get here. Every news reporter is committing treason. I don't know if they're doing the public an adequate service. I think that the ones that actually, if they really wanted to distinguish themselves as journalists, they would go after this electoral fraud stuff and follow it to its end and start asking good questions there. Unfortunately, a lot of our media has become echoes of conformity, of whatever the line is that's being parroted. Okay, red, white, and black are colors of the New World Order. If you could tell me how you know that, then comment below and I'll get to the comment. Norm, yes, we are killing the elderly. And you know, when the elderly die, or when they get dementia, we are losing the people that had fiber and had the culture, which has been so destroyed in recent decades intentionally. And that is another part of the sadness. You know, they call the World War II generation the greatest generation. Whether that's a fair moniker, I think they're definitely worthy of our respect. And he even talked to that man in Moose Jaw. He is the last veteran that he knows of from World War II. You know, and he's 95. I mean, they just do the math of years. There's not going to be that many left. And, you know, when they go, who's going to carry our flag? So, hey, right on. You listened to Dave before me. Yes, X22, I presume. Although I must also say there's another Dave who's great. His name is Dave Janda. He's on Operation Freedom. His channel is still on YouTube. He's one of the people that was audited in a ridiculous fashion when they sent the IRS after all conservatives in the States. He also had a very interesting interview he did with Sarah Westall, whose channel was also taken down, but it's still on BitChute. And he talks about how when he was trying to forward very good health policy, the chairman of the Republican Party actually called him into his office and said, Dave, I like you. You've got great ideas. It's very apparent that you care about the people, but I want to warn you not to run. Because if you run, they will kill you. That's what he said to him. And so he was told, don't go to a private party in Washington, not at Vice President Bush's house, as Reagan was ruling in those years. You can go to a baseball game or something with them, but don't go to a private party. And between the lines, the reason for that is that they'll put something in your drink and you'll wake up in a compromising situation and then they own you. There's more bribery and blackmail going on than we would believe. And one of the things that Bill Clinton said about that Netflix series House of Cards, he says 95% of the stuff in that show is true. Well, let's think about all the bribery, sex, blackmail, you know, killing, everything. 95% of the stuff in the show was true. That's right from Bill Clinton. All right. Yes, they are locked in their room like prisoners. They would rather die of the disease than of loneliness. Yes, and the Ontario government would not let families take their loved ones out of the old folks' home into their home. That is sad. And actually, one of the articles I did was somebody who she probably should have been in care because her health was diminishing, and she said, I just do not want to die alone. She says that would be better to die a little earlier than to die alone. And so her husband's learning. He's in his 70s, and she's got, you know, various things, and he's doing his best. And you know, they're living in Alberta. Okay, yeah, and keep them from talking and communicating with younger folk. Boy, I think it'd be great for all the kids to do some report. You know, if your school is asking for a report, do some history. Or parents, like, get a recording device and talk to your grandparents if they're still around, and let them tell you how things were. Yeah, old people and the knowledge of the past, it is sad what they're doing to them purposely. We are failing our seniors in this country while governments focus on interfering with the general public's liberties. We've only had 34 deaths in Canada of COVID of people under 50. Think about that. Think if we shut down society for everything that was that lethal, or should I say that benign, we would never open up again. We became a bad actor when the cons dropped bombs on Libya in 2011, and after Trudeau became a UN agenda salesman. You know, I just saw how actually Gaddafi had a quote about how the West manufactures diseases and makes vaccines. That was one of his comments that he had made. I think even been in a UN address. Canada's been a bad actor for 100 years now. Churchill and Stalin on Manitoulin Island in Ontario in 1933. Why? I don't know, and I didn't know that before. I can tell you that, well, actually, hang on. 1933, that's interesting. That's interesting because when we think about the pre-war era, pre-World War II, yeah, that's curious. They could have actually apprehended Trotsky before he went over to Russia, and in fact, Canada did apprehend Trotsky before he went over to help get the communist revolution going. And the British said, he's one of our assets, and so you let him go. So they did that. There is a very curious and what would be to many a surprising history in the back pages and what has gone on in our world. It's not all that it has seemed to be. Sheep masks are an article of clothing. The government says I can't sell them to you. I wonder if that would work. Do I think that the demon rats will be crying for 4 more years? I think there's going to be a very drastic political realignment in the United States. And I don't know entirely what it's going to look like. But I think that first of all, there's been such a betrayal of President Trump by these wuss Republicans. And there's going to be so much deviousness shown as to what the Democrats were doing that I think that I don't even know if the Democrats will survive. And the Republicans will be severely challenged, I think, by some kind of upstart patriot party. And that's what I think. And great. Both Daves are great. Yepper. And Mark is agreeing. Okay. Thank you so much. Nice to see a Facebook comment come up. It means you could see what I was doing. Hey, thanks for watching. And it timed out at an hour, and that's about what I want to do. If you want to support this channel, my email is getting typed out here. It is leehardingsk@gmail.com. You can support this channel. I would love to upgrade what I have got and to get some better technology, and we can start working with this. And if you live in Regina, I have a 1-bedroom condo that is vacated that I desperately need someone to be. $800, 16-131 Angus Road. All right, and a final word from Robert. Channel, gonna have to watch you more. I will have to do more so you can watch me more. Thanks for the encouragement. God bless you all. Stay as positive as you can. Let's make all the difference that's within our hands to do. Bye for now.